Hello and welcome to today's webcast hosted by WeSpire, 5 Steps for Embedding ESG into Your Corporate Culture. I'm Heather Clancy, Editorial Director at GreenBiz Group, and I am pleased, as always, to welcome listeners from around the world. Before we begin, a few housekeeping details. The screen you're looking at has a number of features I'd like to point out. As the slide on your screen shows, you can resize and move around the various windows or widgets on the webcast platform to optimize your viewing experience. On the bottom of your window, there's a toolbar with various buttons. You can download the slides from today's webcast and other resources by clicking on the button marked Resources. If you have questions for today's speakers, simply click on the Q&A button and type your questions into the Q&A window that appears. We'll be fielding those later on in this program, but don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. Finally, feel free to share what you're learning with your Twitter network by clicking the Twitter button and using the hashtag GRNBZ. And now on to today's discussion. It is common for sustainability, well-being, social impact, and diversity and inclusion programs to have siloed ownership, where teams nearly compete against each other for resources and employee attention. But an integrated approach to these vital ESG issues, one that embeds environmental, social, and governance concerns into corporate culture holistically, can bring significant positive impact, resulting in much stronger buy-in. Informed by fresh data from employee engagement specialist WeSpire, our guest speakers today will share best practices and lessons encountered while bringing an integrated ESG engagement strategy to life within their companies. Among the things you'll learn today, why your company needs an integrated ESG engagement strategy, ideas for aligning your ESG goals with key culture metrics, how to determine the maturity level of your company's approach, and 5 steps to implementing an integrated ESG engagement strategy. Joining me today are Susan Hunt-Stevens, the founder and CEO at WeSpire, Nia El-Hamaki, Environmental Sustainability Program Manager at Cox Enterprises, and Aaron Byrne, Director of Corporate Sustainability and Social Impact at Novo Nordisk. And now I will pass it over to Susan Hunt-Stevens to discuss the steps you might take in developing and embracing a world-class employee engagement strategy. Susan, take it away.
Thank you so much, Heather. For those of you who are not familiar with WeSpire, we are first and foremost a technology company that large, primarily forward-thinking companies are using to manage their employee engagement programs. And we've spent 10 years in the sustainability space. But in the last 3 years have seen a massive convergence of sustainability, social impact, which includes volunteering and giving, well-being, and positive workplace culture, programs like diversity, equity, inclusion, mission, corporate values, coming together in these organizations. And in our work with 70-plus programs, one of the things that tends to happen is that we arrive to implement the technology and in the process realized that there wasn't always an integrated strategy, and that in the process of doing the technology implementation, we would often have to step back and put together much more of an integrated strategy in collaboration with the team. So about 2 years ago, we thought, hey, maybe there's a better way to do this, and created a very small group that would be able to take some of our data, our best practices data, benchmarks, a proprietary maturity model that we had developed in consultation with a number of our customers, and be able to work with people to put that strategy in place to make the business case for that integrated strategy, be able to set the goals and the metrics for that strategy, and most importantly, not just measure it in terms of program outcomes, how much energy, waste, water, and fuel you saved, how many hours or dollars or social impact was created in your programs, or various aspects around absenteeism or health and well-being, or diversity outcomes in your composition, employee composition, but be able to look at how are these programs impacting culture? How are they driving your employee satisfaction and referral rates? How are they driving your retention rates? How are they driving performance, and make that case? So we've now done integrated ESG strategies for over 10 customers, and they include some of the world's largest consulting firms, pharmaceutical companies, manufacturers, consumer packaged goods companies. So real diversity of industries as well as companies. So some of you are probably thinking, well, how do I even know if I need this? Maybe we already have this. And so what I would encourage you to think about is there's a set of questions that we tend to get asked when we come in or ask. And the first is, what are the participation levels and awareness levels of your various programs? And do you even know the answer to this? One of the most interesting pieces of data that we have found in many of our customers is when we ask employees why they haven't participated in certain initiatives, the number one reason, pretty much every single time, and it's usually a number somewhere between 60 and 70%, is the employee says, I didn't know it existed. And so awareness is really one of the biggest challenges, and raising awareness is one of the biggest challenges for these programs. The second greatest impact on participation levels does tend to be employees saying that they don't have enough time to participate or don't have the support to be able to participate, but those numbers are in the teens relative to the awareness. So the second thing is, are these programs being coordinated in an integrated way? And that does not mean that one person is at the top and they all report to this person. This does not mean that one person manages every program. What it means is the program owners are actively collaborating to see what kinds of things they can do to work together. So for example, if the sustainability team is doing a really big push around a zero waste or circular economy, have they teamed up with the social impact team to add a component that brings to life a social impact strategy? Are they looking at schedules and making sure that there's not way too much happening or way too little happening in any one point in time? The third question is, who owns this? And this is one of the most interesting questions that we ask, and it's very interesting even on the senior executive team. If you ask, who owns employee engagement? Often people look at each other, and then the answer is, well, HR is often a solution provider and they measure it, but they don't necessarily own the programs that are being implemented. And I think that's one of the things that becomes an important part of our process, is just to make clear who owns what in the aspect of engagement, because HR is a huge partner. Comms is a huge partner. The program owners have the knowledge and expertise that comms and HR are going to have. And then, of course, the business unit leaders are absolutely critical to have that level of support. And the higher the level of support in the company in terms of board level support, C-suite level support, the greater the adoption rates and the impact rates that we see. Then finally, the last question, and this is a question I think for a long time people have really struggled with in these areas. What impact are these programs having on our business? Often the answers are, we know what impact it's having in terms of quantity, how many people are participating, or how many hours, or how many dollars. We, of course, have been helping for years in helping the sustainability impact of this, but how is this driving the financials of the business as well? And making that financial big business case for the engagement in these programs is both very doable, absolutely critical, and the good news is there is a very, very strong ROI, particularly when you start to link it to those cultural metrics that have very good numbers around them. Every company knows what an improvement in 1 percentage point of retention would be worth to the company. Every company has a formula, and many of the large HR consulting firms have been working with you for years to know for every 5 percentage point improvements in engagement, how does that impact revenue in the following year? But you need to have those numbers for yourself. So the 5 steps when we come in and start to work with somebody is first and foremost to establish that baseline. What are your baseline metrics for culture? Do you have a North Star metric? I can't say the number of companies when we've asked that. What's your North Star culture metric? Most people didn't know and hadn't necessarily collaborated enough with different teams to really have everybody anchored around their top HR culture metric. But also, what are your current participation and awareness levels? What are the qualitative factors? What do people think about the programs? Do employees like them? Do they think that they really resonate, or do they not? How do they prefer to participate? So a lot of times this data is available, a lot of times it's not, and so we will help you collect that data. I know one of the biggest concerns that we hear is survey fatigue, and what I'm here to assure you is that employees are not fatigued by surveys, but they are absolutely fatigued by a lack of action responding to surveys. So we call it lack of action fatigue. So what we also do in that surveying is make sure that we're going to close the loop with those people who gave us the data and tell them what we're going to do based on the effort that's going to be pulled together as a result of capturing this data. So the next thing is to prioritize different opportunities in terms of not only which are the opportunities that employees are most interested in being engaged in, most mentioned, referenced, most popular, most easy and feasible for them to participate in. So which ones have what we call the highest engageability compared to the materiality, so that we can identify where is that top right box, that really high profile set of opportunities for us to be able to engage. We then work to set goals that are aligned with that impact for the program, and we see this as a long-term thing. We've been working with many of our customers for 6+ years, and so having a long-term view on these goals. One of our favorite times to come in is when you're getting ready to announce a new set of, say, 2030 goals, so that we can say what are the engagement goals that are aligned with your 2030 goals. We then work with you to develop high impact, both global. These are the things that we're going to do from a global level across these areas, and here's what we're going to do from a local level. And how do we unleash the power of the local owners to be able to create things that make sense for them based on their role, based on their geography, based on the region, et cetera. And then the last part that's really important is to measure success, calibrate that success, and continuous improvement, and to communicate it. The maturity model, this has a lot of words on it. For those of you downloading, you can read it in detail. But what it does is it's an assessment that helps you understand where you are relative to what we've seen in terms of transformational, best practice, integrated engagement programs, and people who are just getting started. And so we come in and we do a broad assessment to let you know where you are in this maturity model, and therefore what steps you want to take next. You do not want to set yourself up to try to go from the second developing area to transformational all in 1 year. It doesn't work that way. There really is a set of things that you need to evolve through and put in place. And then when you get wins on that, I think you can jump a box sometimes, but you do want to see this as a journey. As I mentioned in the prioritization process, what you're going to get is literally a 2x2 matrix that's looking at the levels of engageability and high materiality, but across these initiatives. And so it's a very interesting process to figure out materiality. And what we're looking at is materiality on the business. What is going to have the greatest impact on our business financially? And so interestingly enough, you could see something where innovation and driving product line innovations and new ideas and solutions is going to be one of the most material things you could do, but improving psychological safety and how employees are feeling if you have a low psychological safety score could be also up there right next to food waste or mindfulness. And so you're really already taking an integrated approach with the benchmarking and assessment of materiality. Then it's setting those engagement goals that are aligned with impact. We can help show you different North Star metrics that other people have set. And in some cases, it might be a referral metric like Employee Net Promoter Score, or a pride metric like pride in the organization. In some cases, they're going to go with a metric that's more focused on the actual behavior around retention. Are people staying? Some may say that it's a specific group of hard to attract and hard to retain employees, and you're going to measure it both in terms of an overall referral metric and then a retention metric of certain performance or a performance development metric. So we've seen a whole array of North Star metrics. I don't think there's any one silver bullet North Star metric. I think there's a metric that's right for every company. And then underneath each pillar, you're going to also develop those metrics for each of those pillars. And so you're going to have your programmatic metrics tied to each of these, but you're also going to say, what impact are we expecting DE&I to have on retention? What metric are we expecting sustainability to have on retention? So then when you measure it and are able to measure the impact, you're able to see, are these programs contributing as we expected? And the final thing that I would just say is that when you are setting those targets and those goals, it's really important to kind of socialize why those goals are important and what's in it for that manager. And when you can make this really, really relevant so that managers and senior leaders understand why your ESG programs are going to help them achieve their goals. And so it's not that they're just helping you achieve your zero waste goals or helping you achieve your broader social impact goals, but really how is this translating to hitting their goals? And every manager gets a report on their engagement rate. Every manager is evaluated in terms of retention. Every management is looked at in terms of how they develop talent. So you always want to frame this back to the manager. Here's how these programs are going to affect you. Then the most important thing is this combination, and people ask us, well, should we be doing global engagement or local engagement? And the answer is yes. You want to have some broad global programs that really resonate with the vast majorities of your employees. However, those are going to be the high-profile initiatives. What's as important, if not more important, is making sure you have a structure of local engagement ambassadors. They may be by vertical, because people who are interested in sustainability may or may not want to run well-being or social impact programs. So you have to think about the right structure, and we can advise, but empowering them to create location-specific programs and to really modify even some of the global goals. You put a broad framework in place for what you want people working on, but let them localize it in a way that's going to resonate for their geography or for their department or for their work environment. Last, measure and communicate success over and over and over again. And that's one of the things that we are most proud of in terms of what's come out of the platform over the last 10 years is this ability to link participation in each of these programs with not only that programmatic data, but with that HR data, and to be able to be running the numbers to show, here's how this is hitting employee Net Promoter Score. Here's how this is influencing retention. Here's how this is influencing other, revenue gains or cost savings and efficiency gains. And being able to communicate that really turns ESG from being felt like really the right thing to do to, in addition, being the smart thing to do. And I think that is something that we just see over and over in these organizations, is it really is the smart thing to do. If you have further questions or are interested in learning more, we have an entire insights team that publishes very regularly our research and our data and things like that. You can also reach out to me personally, Susan@WeSpire.com, if you are interested in learning more about how to go about creating a strategy. I feel like everyone feels better when there is one in place, so whether we can help you or at least give you the tools to help yourself, we are thrilled to do that. And with that, I'll turn it back to Heather.
Great, thanks for those insights, Susan. You actually answered one of the questions that popped in while you were speaking already on the North Star metrics. I have a second question for you. As you're integrating these thoughts and these programs and these initiatives together, how important is it that you cross-train the actual teams that are supporting these engagement programs? So, in other words, you might have a diversity and inclusion expert over here versus a social impact expert. Are you going to be cross-training the teams that manage these programs so that they can speak to all of those initiatives? Is that something that you're striving for over time? Or are you still going to have sort of subject matter experts, if you will?
So I think the important thing is that everybody, especially if they're using a tool like the WeSpire platform, is that everybody understands how to use the tool and how to use the tool to support their programs, but also should it be necessary, sometimes it's helpful if people can back other program managers up, for example, if they're on vacation or if somebody has a leave or there's an attrition situation or something like that. So cross-training in terms of how to run the programs, I think is really valuable. In terms of the subject matter expertise, I think the place where the cross-pollination is most valuable is to understand the two things. One is that what's the benefit of the programs collaborating together? And one of the really interesting things we've seen on the platform is initially program owners were really concerned that participation is going to drop in their program if there are other programs that people are aware of and participating in. And in fact, what happens is the participation rates rise in both programs. And what we like to say is the array of programs can attract every single employee in the company, but not every single employee is going to necessarily participate in every single program. So understanding how to collaborate, understanding how to add tie-ins between your two programs, I think is a really valuable piece of this for the cross-marketing and for getting people who, might not have naturally been interested in, say, well-being, but were in volunteering to suddenly try something in well-being.
Super, thank you. I know that you'll probably be able to get in deeper to some examples later on in the general Q&A session. But first, we'd love to hear from a couple of companies that have some very practical advice. First is we're going to hear from Mia El-Hamaki, who will share how Cox Enterprises united some previously siloed initiatives into one platform. Mia, the platform is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for letting me join today. For those who may not know, Cox Enterprises is a privately held holding company. We're headquartered in Atlanta. We have approximately 55,000 employees and $21 billion in revenue. And we have a diverse workforce. Our major operating subsidiaries are Cox Communications, which is the third largest cable company, and Cox Automotive, which includes brands like AutoTrader and Kelley Blue Book and Mannheim. And as a company, Cox has a long history in conservation and community. In 2015, we actually started using WeSpire for our environmental sustainability employee engagement program. So we've been using WeSpire for a long time now, and our sustainability program was very successful. This platform grew awareness for our Cox Conserves program year over year, and we truly started to see a culture change with our sustainability values. And as Susan said, it started to become one of our most recognized and embraced programs. But one of the challenges that we saw was that sustainability was just one of several company values. So we also had wellness and diversity and inclusion, and our longstanding volunteering programs were also important. But as is so often true in a large organization, we were unintentionally competing against one another for employees' time and attention. So you can see a number of examples of our programs. These each had different sign-up pages. Events and activities were difficult for employees to find. Everything was pretty much individually branded and challenging to track. And so as program administrators, we really had to be honest with ourselves about working in silos, how we were tracking differently, how we were communicating differently, and how this resulted in an inconsistent employee experience. So many of our key players, we worked across departments to try and solve this problem, and we actually decided WeSpire was the best, most customizable tool that would be able to grow with us as we move towards creating a one-stop shop for employee engagement. And for us, this group was a mix of program managers, IT teams, executive sponsors, leadership from across the company, and we really came together to try to move forward with a one-stop shop for employee engagement. So at Cox, we love pilots. So we started about a year ago bringing together all four of Cox's signature employee engagement programs onto one platform. We piloted with about 8,000 employees at our headquarters, and the results were overwhelmingly positive and actually led to us fully launching nationwide this year in February. So post-launch, we immediately saw a significant lift in all of our programs. So the number of employees engaging with the platform jumped 15% in just 6 months. We were really excited by that. Another thing that we were looking for was cross-pollination. So meaning when a visitor comes to our platform for one program, we actually saw that they ended up viewing an additional 2 programs. So our platform experience began to reflect the crossover between our programs. Someone interested in volunteering at a park cleanup, for example, could also decide to join a wellness hydration challenge and stay hydrated at the event. And then they may also track their green action of using a reusable water bottle as well, which tied to our sustainability impacts. So we're really seeing that the online experience more closely matched and the overlap in behaviors that we really wanted to encourage in real life. And this is not rocket science, but it did take a lot of collaboration and coordination behind the scenes to get to this place. Another thing that we looked for was employee support of one platform. So we measured what Susan alluded to as a Net Promoter Score, which is a rating scale asking how likely are you to recommend the platform. And this actually lived inside of our platform. And we continue to score very highly with the numbers increasing every month. Lastly, and maybe one of the best parts about bringing all of these things together is we have some real comprehensive data and insight into our employee engagement programs across all 4 areas. So now that we have a baseline data, we're able to really look at engagement along with HR data, as Susan was saying, and look at retention and performance to see our impacts of our engagement programs. We do have a program manager for each channel who ensures that the content and campaigns support our program goals. But again, one of the benefits is that reporting is centralized on one platform. So we're able to easily access and pull things and data requests for things like a CSR report, for example. So after launching the platform in February, it removed some of the administrative burden, so we were really able to focus on the content and quality of our campaigns. So I just wanted to share 2 examples and some of the results. And this is a combination of work from lots of our teams internally. I'm happy to be able to share some of these results today. So Chairman's Challenge is a sustainability program where employees can submit green, innovative ideas to help us reach our company conservation goals around carbon, waste, and water. In past years, we started to see the number and quality of submissions declining for several reasons. One of those being that we were only tapping into the super green community, people who were familiar with Cox conserves, and we were starting to get the same ideas and not a lot of variation. Moving this challenge to WeSpire after our launch provided a social element that lacked in past years, and what it did was expand the pool of ideas. It also had a great social element, so ideas were voted on real time by other employees. Employees could share ideas, users could comment on those ideas, and so this alone organically elevated our program in a number of ways. But I would say the main benefits was, 1, awareness. So we expanded the pool of ideas beyond our super green users. We tapped into the larger employee base. We received more idea submissions than ever before from all across the organization, a variety of levels, and we actually had over 2,000 new users engage in just a 30-day period. So we were really excited by some of these results. Moving the program to an integrated employee engagement program also gives us insight into the types of content and programs that employees connect with. So for our employees, we were able to see where the majority of ideas were coming from in the organization, what the most popular types of ideas were, and then we started to be able to connect dots and see trends and ultimately tweak programs and shift if things are not resonating with employees. This is true not only for this one Chairman's Challenge program, but it's also true across all areas, all channels as well. The second example is our month-long volunteering campaign known as No Excuses. So this is a month-long campaign encouraging people to give back to the community, volunteer, and trade excuses for reasons. So this program, it grew up through one of our divisions, and And so we did have a baseline prior to our WeSpire launch, but moving the campaign to WeSpire allowed us to expand to our first ever company-wide volunteering campaign and multiply our impact. For the first time, we had a company-wide strategy, and for the first time, we were able to collectively measure that impact and share that. We also loved that participation happened more organically. What we saw was that our employee ERG groups, employee resource groups would band together to volunteer. We were also capitalizing on the synergies between our different programs, which was really amazing. There was something for everyone. And this is also a great example of where we had a global campaign that was then localized. Administrators had the ability within this framework to really localize and develop events that felt custom and local to them. But then the benefit for us, again, was that it was tracked in one place. People also shared stories in one place, and that raised awareness for all of our programs. And we really were no longer competing against one another, but were able to really lift all together. So this employee engagement, as Susan said, continues to be an evolution. And one of our key learnings has been that establishing a good cross-functional working team that meets regularly and has C-suite support is critical. For Cox, we started with one program and we've expanded. Our goals are to try to increase our employee engagement by 10% each year, and we have already exceeded those goals, and we're excited to see where we land at the end of 2019. So I'll pause there and throw it back to you, Heather.
Great. I have one question for you. First, we are starting to see some come in, but I encourage everyone online to submit your questions because we will get to them in a few moments. But just curious as to what's next. So you mentioned that this sort of started as a pilot. So can you give us a sense of, you know, what's going to happen over the next 12 months? Do you have any specific, you mentioned your engagement metric that you'd like to see, but as far as the rollout goes, any other thoughts you can share?
Sure. So now that we've done our pilot and we've done our national launch, we're really in the data gathering phase right now. And we hope to have all of the data by the end of 2019 to have a really great baseline across all of our programs. And so at that point, then we'll start to run the analytics with our HR teams to really start to look at trends and on productivity and retention. We also are kind of doing a refresh of our CSR strategy. So a lot of this data is kind of feeding into that as well. And then one of the things we didn't do when we initially launched, but that we're looking forward to doing, is rebranding the platform to be something that's holistic. When we initially launched, our employees really were connected to the different program area brands, so Cox Conserves, and we had our Team Cox Volunteer program, and we'll continue to have that, but we're really excited to kind of launch an overall employee engagement umbrella brand that all of these programs kind of fall under.
Super great. I know there's some questions for you that we'll get to in a moment. Thank you for taking that one. First, though, we're going to hear from Erin Byrne. So she's going to discuss Novo Nordisk's triple bottom line approach to decision making. Erin, your turn.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for having me today. As mentioned, my name is Erin Byrne. I'm the Senior Director of Corporate Sustainability and Social Impact at Novo Nordisk in the United States. For those of you who may not be familiar with Novo, we're a global healthcare company with over 95 years of experience in diabetes, but we also work in other therapeutic areas such as hemophilia, growth hormone disorders, and obesity. We are a Danish company, so our global headquarters are right outside of Copenhagen, but our U.S. headquarters are just outside of Princeton, New Jersey, which is where I work. So I'm honored to be with you today to talk a little bit more about the aspects of how we as a company have embedded these ESG ideas and corporate social responsibility and sustainability into our business strategies. So let me start there. So first, a lot of corporations always have to consider how they're going to meet their financial bottom line, how they're going to invest, what they're going to do with their profit. At Novo Nordisk, we actually have a triple bottom line that really guides us in all that we do in terms of our business strategy. And it really states that we are equally responsible to the society, to the environment, in addition to that very important financial bottom line. But it is a business principle that frames our long-term strategy for our ambition to be a very sustainable business. One of the things I'll point out here is the fact that we have this quote and the picture from Lars, who's our global CEO. And it really signals something, which is that this business concept is embraced from the top down. And that's critically important. And I'll also talk a little bit about why it's important to get that bottom-up engagement as well. But it also has to set the tone at the top to really ensure that these concepts are embedded throughout the company. And it really obligates everyone in the company to consider how their daily decisions are affecting, the business, but most importantly, the people in the communities and the patients that we serve. Tabbing the wrong thing here. Sorry about that. So what is a little bit more about the triple bottom line, and how do we make sure that we are walking the talk? Well, one of those ways is the fact that we have it embedded into two different areas, the Novo Nordisk Way and our Articles of Association. So the Novo Nordisk Way is essentially our employee ethics. It's really how we as day-to-day employees strive to do our work in a way that's going to ultimately help the patients that we are striving to create therapeutics for every day. But it's also embedded here in the Articles of Association or our company bylaws. So it's really a way for us to say, hey, we're not just putting a PR spin on this. We're not just having it be something that's added on to our corporate business strategy, but it's truly to say that we mean business when we talk about the triple bottom line, and here are some quality actions that we're taking to showcase that to all of our stakeholders involved. So it sounds really easy at the top, but how do you actually make it come to life? Well, first, if you just ask yourself some of these questions at the surface, it sounds really easy, right? Is the decision that you're making around this business project or strategy, is it environmentally responsible, socially, financially? And that can get tricky, I will say. It's very clear questions rather. But when you're weighing things, you're weighing the wants of certain stakeholders internally, right? Your bosses, some of your colleagues, people important to move your project forward. And they may just be looking at the financial aspects of it. But having to take into consideration the other two are sometimes hard. So it does take a lot of discussion. Sometimes there's, some give and take on some of them, because sometimes you have to be a little bit more on one side or in one of those three buckets than you are in the other. So the first thing I always tell people, even internally, is to start asking yourself these questions, start wrestling with them, start seeing where it takes your mental journey and your conversations around your strategy, and then start getting, peeling the layers back to get into more of the nitty gritty around what does it really mean? If one project or one vendor is cheaper, but, that project's going to have a little bit more of a, footprint on the environment, does that really align with our values? And how can we intentionally think a little bit deeper as to what some solutions are? And that's really where it gets into that type of thinking around shared value. Now, what is shared value? Well, if anyone's familiar with Michael Porter from the Harvard Business School, he really, along with some of his colleagues, have grandfathered this notion of shared value, where it is really a business management strategy that companies take to find business opportunities in social problems. So that idea that philanthropy and CSR is just totally separate, the warm and fuzzy, and then the true business gets done on the other side, it's really taking that notion down and trying to mix them together, saying that there is a strong link between gaining a competitive advantage while considering these social responsibilities that we have as organizations in our, in our societies. So it's a way to do it very, very intentionally, and doing it right will actually give you this virtuous cycle of continuous improvement. So it's really, again, being about intentional about how do we think about these social problems, not just from, a donation and a grants and philanthropy way, but more from a business solution. So really trying to tie those two together is really, really critically important. Just going to advance the slide here. So how do we do that? Well, we also have this notion of changing diabetes here at Novo Nordisk. It's been a tagline for the 13 plus years that I've been with the organization. And we do have a handful of key initiatives at the bottom, as you can see. And some of them are very much a shared value strategy, a triple bottom line strategy approach, while others are a little bit more employee engagement focused. But the key here is really that the passion for the patient and the society is truly woven through our culture. It's something that our organization and our employees really value, and I think that's also where you continue to get great employee engagement. So on that point, we talked a little bit earlier about the importance of having executive buy-in and making sure that you have that top-down strategy. But it really isn't going to work if you don't have that employee engagement and that bottom-up strategy as well. What I'm finding is having ambassadors and people that have that real grassroots mentality is also just as critical, because that's where you're going to get the full success, right? If your boss and your CEO is just telling you to do something, but you don't feel like you have the culture to thrive and even bring your ideas and truly roll up your sleeves and get involved somehow, then it's not going to be as authentic and genuine. And that's one of the things that my team does, is really striving for, is how do we gain, aside from the strategic part, gain the employee engagement and get really employees fulfilled in what they're doing. So a couple things here on this slide that I'll go over really quickly is we have a day of service, I think similar to potentially what Cox had mentioned, but maybe a little bit different. Ours is not as long as theirs, but we have a day of service that it's on site, where employees are encouraged to come out individually within their teams, within their departments, and we provide a way for them to give back to the community. We've done it in various different ways, from, packing food for hurricane victims. We built Build-A-Bears to send off to kids at diabetes and hemophilia camps. We've done a variety of different things. And actually my colleague who leads this is even working on trying to figure out how to extend this home office day of service into the large field, the people who work, our sales representatives who are not in the New Jersey office in one day. So we're working on that. Another is Casual for a Cause. So we have Casual Fridays at Novo Nordisk, but continue along the lines of that, the notion is that people would donate to a charity once a month. One charity is picked per month, rather, and that would, in a way, allow them to continue to go casual for Fridays. So Casual for a Cause. And it's really nice. What we do there is we actually have our employee resource groups choose a charity that aligns to their focus, and then we scatter them out throughout the year, and that is how we choose those specific charities throughout the year. And we also match to them each month too, which is also important to know, because as of right now, we do company matching, but it is also on a limited list. It's not to every valid 501c3. So this is just one way for us to also give back to some of those charities that may not be on our signature programming list, but that are really, really meaningful to the patients, to the employees that we work with. So speaking of those employees, we want them to get out and volunteer. So we want them to do it individually, and we want them to do it in teams. And so we offer grants for good. So the premise behind that is if you meet a certain hour, requirement that you have volunteered for, again, whether it be in a team as a team building event or something along those lines, or whether it's in your own individual time, that you can request a grant for good, and we will validate those hours, and then we will send the organization a donation as well, based off of, again, the individual's time there. And then last but not least is I can say very proudly that we launched yesterday our Take Action USA platform that we've been working with Susan and her team on. Very similar in the notion of what Maya Cox had mentioned, but it's really a way for our employees to really start taking actions. So we've had a portal in the past that was used for them that was very process-oriented for logging volunteer hours and requesting a grant for good, but we really wanted to spur more ownership, more excitement, more fulfillment in these areas. And this is what we have been hearing from our employees that they want. They wanted to feel how they, regardless of what they were doing from a business strategy perspective, how can they as an individual take more actions to help support our triple bottom line, whether that be from an environmental standpoint, the volunteering, the social standpoint. So we have just turned the switch on after a long time of planning this past Monday, and we are really, really excited to see the uptake that it's going to have. The buzz leading up to this has been fantastic, and people are really waiting for it, so we can't wait to see the future of developing a benchmark and then seeing how it really helps us grow all the aspects that Susan and I have talked about throughout this webinar. So that is all I have. So Heather, why don't I hand it back over to you?
Great, Erin. Thank you so much. I have a question for you before we get into the group, the ones that have come in from the attendees. It sounds like you have great ideas coming from your employees, which is awesome. I'm just wondering how you walk the line of what employees are saying they want and are suggesting versus what your company, from a strategic standpoint, needs to prioritize. Like, is there any disconnect, or do you find having to make tough decisions on how to sort of balance or walk the line between the different things you can support? Imagine you have a lot of choices.
Yeah, there's always a lot of choices. And I think, it's a really interesting question because it's going to run the gamut, right? You have individuals that will make a very, very small suggestion, but a powerful one. And then you have employees that make really lofty suggestions and really want to see them implemented immediately. So it is a little bit of that give and take. There are hard discussions, as I mentioned in my one slide, just amongst teams trying to say, all right, here's our budget, here's how we can go about this. Well, if we do it one way, it might have a little bit more impact on the environment, but it's going to be a little cheaper, and so really weighing those decisions are really, really important. So same thing with employees. We always want to hear from our employees. And again, that some of our best suggestions have come from just employees, and walking up and just providing that verbal feedback to myself or somebody else, or dropping a suggestion in a suggestion box. And so it's really, it all depends on, the nature of the suggestion and the idea and, how we can bring it to fruition.
Great, thank you so much. Let's get to the questions that have come in. By the way, if you haven't put one in, just type it into the Q&A box window on your screen. If your question can't be answered during the live event, now they'll be archived and our speakers will get access to them. So I'd like to start with a sort of a general question, and this can go to anyone. Maybe we can start with Susan. You kind of addressed it a little bit, but do you still have to make the business case for embedding ESG in order to secure funding for these initiatives and positions?
Absolutely.
So okay.
I have never worked with a company who didn't need to, in some way, shape, or form, make the business case for putting time, energy, whether that's human resources to manage these programs, or technology or marketing or comms resources to support them, they need to do it. You know, and the thing I think maybe it's because I came out of marketing and I'm a former chief marketing officer, but, you know, 10, 15 years ago in marketing, you had to make the business case for some things, but you didn't for everything. And thanks to technology and marketing automation tools and things like that, you now can make the business case for pretty much anything you're doing in the marketing realm. Not everything, but most things. And I think the same is finally becoming true in employee engagement because of the new technologies, because of the ability, you know, for platforms like WeSpire to connect in with HR data, connect in with survey and sentiment data, and be able to show how these programs are impacting HR outcomes, how these programs are impacting environment outcomes, social outcomes, well-being outcomes, diversity outcomes. You can make the business case for doing that. And I would argue that you should be excited about that, and you should do it, and not try to get away without doing it. Because my experience, just, you know, having been an executive in a very large company, is that when you can do that, and when you can point to how this program is impacting the business, you are much more likely to get a lot of support organizationally for participation. And so not only does this move your ESG metrics, it definitely drives your business metrics.
So to kind of follow on that with Mia and Aaron, you know, who are the decision makers in that process? So like, who did you both use the word we a lot. So I'm just curious, who was in the room, and then how are you going to be tracking that case? Like, so what metrics are you using? Can you get a little bit more deeply into that? What exactly are you tracking when you say you're using metrics?
This is Mia from Cox, and I can go ahead and give a shot at answering that question. So in terms of who was in the room, so we started with the 4 program managers who were each running content and campaigns for each of their channels. We also needed to involve for, you know, senior VP levels. So we came together to create the business case. And then from there, it actually went all the way up to our Chief People Officer for approval. And really, you know, through the pilot and since then, we go back on pretty much a quarterly basis to report on results and progress. So our senior leadership is very involved. We also had to include IT teams and our comms teams as well. There are also kind of different groups from the field. We also wanted to make sure we were including people from different divisions to make sure we had a pulse on how our launch was going, and that we continue to keep an ear to the ground in terms of feedback and how we can make the platform better. So I think it'll be different for each company, but that's kind of where we started and evolved. And then in terms of tracking, for us, we really kind of dug into 4 key metrics. One, we wanted to see number of registrations on the platform. So how many new people were registering for the platform. We also, I spoke about this, but wanted to look at cross-pollination. So we were looking at number of page views per channel. We also did some surveys, wanted to make sure we were getting kind of that qualitative feedback. And then we also did the Net Promoter Score, so to ensure that people were on a rating scale enjoying the platform, and we also get qualitative feedback through that survey as well.
Erin, you want to add any more color there?
Sure. For the platform specifically, you know, I had originally pulled a handful of stakeholders around the table just to introduce the concept of it and propose how I saw it helping a variety of different, you know, work streams that were happening within the organization, or notions that, you know, needed to change and so forth. And then it kind of just went back to our team to lift it off the ground. When you do talk resources, we did need to get buy-in for resources, and not necessarily the financial ones in this regard. It was really the human resources to dedicate time to work on it and to support it. So from a communication standpoint and from an IT standpoint. And then after that, it was really kind of doing a little bit of a dog and pony show, if you will, to say, okay, this is coming, and kind of almost full circle to say, we talked about this a long time ago and why it was needed, and we got a lot of heads nodding, and here we've done a lot of this work, and this is, what it's going to be. And we knew our guardrails in terms of decision making on what we really kind of needed to tell the business just needed to happen versus asking for buy-in. And so that was how we approached the platform itself and getting that off the ground. So like I said, we're very excited to see some of the metrics that will come through. And to that point, some of the key things that we're looking at are a lot of what Mia had just referenced. But also for us, we're really interested to see how many hours are our employees volunteering, and where do I need to make the case to grow our, paid time off for volunteering? How much donations are our employees making, and how much matching are we having? And do I need to make the case, after we have better documentation and metrics around that for, even expanding those in those areas? So there are some of the key things that we're also looking at.
Terrific, thank you. We have a great question here. How do you encourage employees in the field, so for example in a warehouse, a factory, et cetera, to engage? I'll just add a little bit to that. In other words, is it available as an app? And by the way, do you expect people to look at this after hours? Anyone?
Well, so this is Erin. So one of the ways that we're trying to engage our field is through leadership, through their leadership. So I actually have a half-written email started before I got on this to follow up to a sales VP. We have a handful of sales VPs, and I have one on that leadership team who's kind of a triple bottom line liaison to me. So I work very closely with him on bringing things forward in that area. So we went back, and they were one of the dog and pony shows that we did to give them a little bit of a heads up, but then also to engage him to say, okay, it's launched, and this is, how can we have a dialogue on how you guys can help cascade this information and support it, and brainstorming session on ways to continue to engage the field members, because, they're a little bit harder to get because they may not see the plasma screens and all the signage that promotes it internally in the office as well.
And in terms of just the brass tacks of the WeSpire platform, it is available both web and mobile. And our mantra is that 100% of employees can engage on their mobile phone, and usually only about 35 to 40 can on desktop. So mobile is increasingly our platform of choice for making sure that the experience is a really, really good one. I think the key thing is making sure that it's accessible and usable, from over the company Wi-Fi, because a lot of employees will need to have access to Wi-Fi, and because what we hear in surveys is that they want to use a mobile web app versus downloading things because of expense and things like that, but also they want to make sure they don't get data charges. So having a mobile app that's accessible via Wi-Fi in the workplace is key. And in terms of expectations, every company is different, but what I'd love to see is that a lot of time spent on the platform happens in kind of those down periods. We see a lot of usage, kind of in the commuting hours, both before work and after work. We see things during breaks. We see spikes at lunch. So, to the extent that engaging and volunteering and your sustainability or triple bottom line innovation programs or things like that is happening instead of Candy Crush, I think it's awesome.
Great, thank you. I have a question for Mia and Erin. Were there any negatives, and how did you handle them? So any hiccups or hurdles that you hit, and how'd you get over them? Mia, do you have anything on that front?
Sure. So I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we faced when we initially launched the One platform was we had previously been using so many other types of platforms that employees were familiar with. So I would say that the biggest challenge was just in terms of change management. We originally had planned to launch with a regular training to all of our administrators, and that went well. But what we did realize was we needed to do more frequent webinars and trainings with them, that one and done was not enough. So that was definitely a major learning. And that's been really great for us because we now have this network and community that we go back to again and again as we're launching campaigns and really kind of fostering this group of people that are champions for us in the field for our programs.
Anything to add, Erin?
I would just say, timing was a little bit of a moving target for us, just because we had ideas of when we wanted to launch, and just looking at other things that were happening around the business and figuring out when the best time to do that was, so that we were not competing for different communication space. There's a lot of things happening within the organization, and people can only hear and retain so much information at once. So really trying to figure out when the best time to kind of break through on that was definitely a challenge and a moving target. And then making sure we actually had to move up our launch a little bit. So then that put a little bit more intensity on just our IT colleagues to make sure that they had done all the testing and it was up and running in time.
I have to call time, which I hate to do because there's some really good questions here, but they'll be shared with you all. So if you want to try to answer them afterwards, you'll be able to. And so I just want to thank you all, Susan, Mia, and Erin, for a great conversation today. Thank you very much to our host, WeSpire, for making this webcast happen. And for those of you out there, if you'd like to rewatch the webcast, the recording will be archived on greenbiz.com, and our team will email you the link once it's available. You can also check out the webcast slides and additional resources by clicking on the button on your window. You'll find some really wonderful things, including some information about GreenBuzz, which is our weekly newsletter on sustainability business news, trends, and analysis. And you can learn more about the GreenFin Summit at GreenBiz 20 next February in Phoenix. The topic of the summit is aligning ESG reporting for companies and institutional investors. So very much a related topic. On behalf of my colleagues at GreenBiz, including our technical director, Isa Stamos, thank you so much for attending today's webcast. If you'd like to watch more, please visit the greenbiz.com events/webcast section. And I'm Heather Clancy. Until next time, have a great day.